You want to do a roll call, Michelle?
Yes, please. Mr. Thomasula?
Here.
Mr. Murray?
Here.
Mr. Nichols?
Here.
Mr. Ramey?
Here.
Mr. Stahl?
Good morning.
Mr. Orzak?
He's always got.
And myself, Michelle Reeder, here.
Okay, you were sent in your package from Michelle the minutes of April 19th. Will it be your pleasure?
Move to approve.
I'll second.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Can we just voice vote this?
Roll call.
Roll call.
Sorry.
Okay.
Mr. Thomasula?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Nichols?
Yes.
Mr. Ramey?
Yes.
Mr. Stahl?
Yes.
Mr. Orzak?
Yes.
And myself, Ms. Reeder? Yes.
Okay. We're going to jump right straight to new business because we have Mike Savcina on Zoom. However, technically, we're going to do that. Thank God you're doing it, not me.
We have it handled. So we have Mr. Cecina on the line today. The issue that we want to talk about is the Justice Center financing. It was presented to the commission previously at a meeting. We had the concept of COPS financing, the certificates of participation that we talked about as an option for the Justice Center. Today we want to show you the current direct debt limitations and that we have the ability to do this as a general obligation debt. The interest rates on COPS financing were starting to rise a little bit, so there was some concern. We looked at this and we do have the option to issue general obligation debt. So that's why we're here today, just to look at this and see if we can get a recommendation from the Finance Committee for the financing. With that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Cecina.
Thank you, Michelle. So the change from issuing this Justice Center debt from certificates of participation to general obligation debt drops our direct debt limit by the $10 million of the Justice Center debt. What has changed is that interest rates, as we all know, have risen over the last couple of years. And when we first started
Mike, or is it me?
It's you.
Okay, thank you.
with this idea,
Well, thanks, Dennis.
the difference between COPS and general obligation debt was about 5 basis points. Since interest rates have risen and safe investments like treasuries are paying more, the differential between revenue debt like COPS and general obligation debt has widened. We're at about 20 basis points difference now, which would cost the city about $20,000 a year in additional debt service if we went with COPS, which is why we've looked at it again. And since there's still capacity left, if we do this as general obligation, we thought it best to recommend that the city and the committee consider general obligation debt for this piece rather than COPS at this time.
Okay, and if I can remind people, the last time that we did talk about this and discuss the alternate financing is we did not want to hand tie future commissions with projects down the line. It appears now that we can go to that issue and not tie the hands of the future commissioners.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I speak. I think we're missing another piece of the puzzle. There was a calculation that was incorrect earlier, and I think
Yeah,
we
that's what I
highlighted.
was, yeah, thank you.
Okay. Have we highlighted that yet?
We have not.
Okay.
So through the chair to Mr. Murray. So when the Finance Committee saw this last time, you saw that the debt limitation was $3 million was our capacity. The change is that the Landing Park project, in the early part of the presentation, it showed it as revenue backed, but when the calculation was done, it was not shown correctly in there as revenue backed and not GO backed. So that's the difference, the major difference of what you saw last time versus what you're seeing here, and why there still is $12 million of limitation here, even after doing the Justice Center as a general obligation debt.
Chairman. So if I can restate it, consistent with the way I expressed it before, we wanted to make sure that future commissions would have some headspace in case an emergency should arise and we would need to do some emergency borrowing. Because we had, and we all looked at it and it was in the wrong spot and none of us caught it at the time. But because we now realize that was not, that is revenue bond, not GO bond, that goes in a different category. It's not subject to limitation. And so we don't have the concern that we did before. I will say, while I have the floor for just a moment, a little disappointed by the public reaction to doing something different. There's so widespread hue and cry about the use of the COPS financing, and a lot of misinformation out there as though the city wouldn't own the Justice Center at the end of that period. It's all nonsense. The fact is, we would own it at the end of the period, and it's only marginally different in title only from a mortgage on your home. So I was disappointed by the public reaction. As we move forward as a city, we need to be open to new methods of doing business, new methods of financing. This was an option that was presented. We looked at it. I think we're going to turn it down, but we need to embrace those kind of new opportunities instead of saying, well, we haven't done it that way, and the LaSalle's isn't opening up, and neither is the Manhattan building again. So,
And I think that's why we have Mike on board to explore different forms of financing. Not right, not wrong, just different, okay? And again, the number of CPAs up here, and even an attorney, and none of us caught it. So with that, I would like to make a recommendation, or have the committee make a recommendation to the commission that we go ahead with the debt financing as opposed to the previous way that we had recommended.
you're looking for a motion?
Yes, please. We're recommending to the,
Since I'm on the commission, I'd rather somebody else make a motion.
yeah,
Yeah, I will move.
Okay,
Yep,
move.
so moved.
And I'll second.
second?
Roll call. Mr. Amasula?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Nichols?
Yes.
Mr. Ramey?
Yes.
Mr. Stahl?
Yes.
Mr. Orzak?
Yes.
And myself, Michelle Reeder, is a yes. Thank you.
Mr. Rusatz.
Cannot vote because he did not listen.
Point that Mr. Rusatz joined us, okay. Okay. We now have our 2023 audit for Ray and Associates, and we have representatives from Ray and Associates. We don't have to do this in executive session because this was issued sometime in June or whatever. So it's already a public document, so.
Ray and Associates filed this at the end of June, June 20th, 21st. The state has approved this at desk review as of Monday of this week. So it is a public document. As of late yesterday, I did not see it on the state's website yet, but that's coming any day yet. But because it has been released through the state, we are here in open session, not executive session for that reason.
Correct. Yep. Morgan Helmick with Ray & Associates. I was the partner in charge on the audit this year. So as Michelle stated, she's correct. Everything was certified by our state's office. It is set to release on your website on the 18th. So I checked this morning for you. I won't go through and read every page here of your ACRA that was submitted. I'll do some key highlights. You know, page 1 of the ACRA itself, that is our opinion letter. So that's an unmodified, cleanest opinion you can have out there. It goes through and states various responsibilities on the ACFR itself, what parts of it we audit, what parts we don't audit. We just review to make sure it appears reasonable. So all your statistical sections, things like that, where it's all that 10-year data that you compile yourselves, we look at it, make sure it matches the numbers within the statements, but we don't audit those figures. We only audit what's within the basic financial statements themselves. Some key highlights I wanted to point out. If you remove all those GASB 68 and 75 and all those unfunded pension liabilities, you can see that the way they present it now, your government-wide is at $38.1 million in equity. If you remove all that stuff, you're actually at $64.3 million if you take all those liabilities that you'll never have to pay out of pocket for. It's just an accounting liability because of the standards. Same thing for business type. You are on the statements themselves at $64 million. You remove all that, you're at $69 million. So, and those were the 22 figures. Now, if you look at that compared to 23 figures, so government-wide 64.2, like I stated last year, this year you've improved that to $80 million. So good fiscal management in place here to keep improving that equity balance themselves. Same thing, you look at business types, $69 million last year, $76 million this year. And some key things to point out that when you review it, you know, what a lot of people look for, last year you had $55.6 million in combined cash. This year, you're at $60.5 million in cash. And then you look at the fact that you have capital assets last year of $157 million. You've increased that to $183 million in capital assets while still increasing your cash balances for your reserves. So that's just good, proper fiscal management. Nothing we can say but good things for Michelle and her team and how they manage everything within the statements themselves. Other than that, I'll turn it over to Tim, who is the manager on the job, to kind of, there's a step there, to talk about some other reports in there.
Okay. I guess maybe to clarify something,
Yeah,
we just have a very,
correct. Yeah, Michelle was supposed to email the ACFR out itself.
okay, I just say, because
So I just kind of.
everything you're going over, we don't physically have.
Yeah.
You'll have it starting now.
Sorry?
I said, you'll have it starting now.
So we'll just
I'm
leave
still
that
going
up.
to complain
So
these
the-
things don't open up.
So like Morgan said, my name's Tim Harold. I was the manager on the audit this year. So I'm going to first start going over just what we did as part of the audit. It's going to be in your packets. It's going to say single audit as the cover page. So I'm just going to go quickly through these report letters that we issued. The first report letter on the second page of the packet is our report discussing the government auditing standards. This is a standard report we are required to issue as part of our issuance. The first paragraph, that's just going to be your quick introduction about what the actual report is. The second section is going to be talking about your report on internal control over financial reporting. The basis of this entire section is primarily to define the difference between control deficiency, material weakness, as well as significant deficiencies. As a whole, overall, throughout this process of the audit, and you'll see it up there on it's going to be the last page of the packet we go over, but it does highlight there were no deficiencies, control, or significant, as well as no material weaknesses noted in the audit this year. So because of that, this whole section is pretty much just informative, giving you some definitions, but overall, from the audit, there were no issues. On the next page, we talk over the report on compliance matters. This is what the main part of this audit is. There are several ORCs out there that the state issues that we are required to test as part of that, and we do limited procedures over that. To note, we do not opine on the city's controls. That is not a requirement as part of this part of the audit. So we will review them on a limited basis based on what the standards of our testing we determine are. But overall, we do not opine on that. And then we will jump over to the next report. That report's going to be basically the summary of the uniform guidance, which is your single audit that you are required to have every year. I'm sure the majority of the people in this room already know that a single audit is when the city expends federal dollars exceeding $750,000 for the fiscal year. A single audit is required by the federal government, and you guys had approximately just shy of $10 million in federal spending this year, so obviously you guys were subject to the single audit, and we will get into the details of that testing here in a few moments. So the first part would be this report, the report we wrote here. Once again, we're talking about just an introduction to the report itself as the federal programs on what we are performing. Then we jump into the basis of opinion on each major fund. The main difference between the last report and this report is since it is subject to single audit by the federal government, we are required to opine on the controls that we are required to test. So based on the requirements over compliance for the single audit major programs that we selected, we are required to test controls related to each one of those pieces as part of the puzzle. So that kind of is outlined here, and that's like one of the big differences. Then at the very bottom of the page, we're talking about the responsibility of management, Michelle and her team, and how they're monitoring this as part of the process going out throughout the year before the audit takes place. And then we get in on the next page, another big section, that's talking about our responsibilities, what we are required to look at as part of the audit and how we are performing this testing. And then at the bottom and onto the final page, it's going to be pretty much the identical paragraphs to the definitions of deficiencies and material weaknesses. They're outlined as part of the government auditing standards. And once again, just to reiterate, it was a clean audit this year. There was no issues, nothing but the single audit that we had any issues with going on. And then we just sum up the overall piece of it to wrap up this letter. Okay. Then if you skip over a couple pages, those are going to be the opinion error that Morgan already touched on. So I'm going to jump over to where you have the federal schedule. It's small. We fit it onto one page, so the font's pretty small on there and a little bit hard to read. Like I said earlier, you guys had just under $10 million in federal spending that required the single audit. This report also will outline any subrecipients that the city sent the federal funds to. The main programs that we tested this year are going to be your CARES Act funding, which came out to $6 million of that nearly $10 million. And then we also tested the transit program, which came out to $1.7 million. So overall, when you look at how much of this federal schedule we tested, it was a good portion of it. We're looking at approximately $7.7 to $7.8 million worth of the $10 million schedule overall. So the next page you'll see, that's just going to be the note disclosures that are required by the federal government as part of the financial process. Basically, any type of schedule you release, you're required to have some note disclosures. I'm not going to get into those. A lot of them are very standard language that you're going to see. If you look at 5-10 cities, they're all going to almost read the exact same, except for which city it's for. All right. So then we will go to the final page of this packet, which is going to be your schedule of findings and question costs. Overall, for anyone that they just want to look at the ACFR as a whole and get a general idea of how the audit went, where the city's at, this is a really good reference for them because it will take them line by line down and basically show them exactly what we've been discussing. There were no material weaknesses. There were no control deficiencies. There was no significant deficiencies. Our opinion on both the financial statement audit and the single audit were both unmodified. It will highlight the major programs that were tested as part of the single audit, as well as it will highlight the dollar thresholds for a single audit. But that is all I have. If no one has any questions, I will turn it over to Nicole for the final report that we're going to take
I'll
over.
just make one quick highlight. I know it looks weird when you read it. As part of that section, it says, is there a low-risk audit? And it says no. However, we have a low-risk audit over the financial statements. That's just clerical purposes because in the prior audit, there was a finding in regards to a major program. So technically, the city's not a low-risk audit until you have 2 clean opinions. So we'll have to audit 40% of your federal funding next year. And then from there, you'll be considered a low-risk audit, bear the fact that there is another clean audit report. And then we're back down to a low risk for single audit purposes only. But there are some changes coming in place. I think for your city cycle, it'll be effective with your 2025 audit. The threshold's been raised to $1 million to require a single audit now. And then as well, effective October 1st, the federal government finally came through and said, yeah, we were dumping all this money out there. And we didn't really give you guys a lot of guidance on how to spend it. So we deemed it a high risk. 3 years later, they came in and said, because of the fact, it's pretty open-ended checkbook, there's only a few things you can't spend it on, they're removing all that high-risk status off of that money. So now it's not an automatic test, it's up to the auditor to assess what the level of spending was for those state and local fiscal funds that were spent. So it's not, it doesn't require it to be looked at in future periods.
All right, my name is Nicole Ratliff. I was the in charge for the audit this year. I will be going over the report to those charged with governance, so the one that has this cover. So we are required by the state to present information to those charged with governance. And basically, this letter will outline our responsibilities with regard to the financial statement audit, as well as the overview of the plan's scope and timing of the financial statement audit. So as you read down through there, it'll spell those out. As we were going through, we encountered no disagreements with management, and there were no significant issues arising from the audit that were discussed or were subject to correspondence with the management. So like Tim and Morgan said, everything was clean. Then we go over other information included in the annual reports. So like Morgan had mentioned when he was speaking, it's our responsibility to audit the face of the financial statements, but we also go back through like the statistical section, the MD&A, and make sure that all of those numbers tie back. And so it'll spell out that that is also our responsibility in here. We have a section in there on our independence. So you'll note that Rain Associates also provides non-audit services to the city, and that includes consulting on the compilation of these financial statements. So this theoretically could impair our independence, but there is no impairment that existed because we apply appropriate safeguards to make sure that the individuals working on the compilation team are not working on the audit, and the members on the audit are not working on the compilation. So we retain responsibility and independence on the statements. And then you'll see that we have summarized the adoption of certain accounting policies throughout the year. So if you note, we saw that applicable was GASB statement number 93, 94, 96, and 99. None of them were material to test for the city, so we had no restatements. We did not identify any significant or unusual transactions, and we identified the following accounting estimates applicable to the city. So anything that they have to make an estimate of to put onto the financials. So that would include that GASB 6875, the net pension liability that Morgan was talking about that isn't actually an out-of-pocket liability, receivables, depreciation expense, and the fair value of investments held by the city. There were no audit adjustments that we had to make or suggest to make, and we just had no issues. And that's all I've got, unless anybody has any questions.
Nope, so we appreciate your time having us today to come out and summarize the audit. Michelle has our contact information. If anybody has any further questions as you get more in depth in reading, don't hesitate to shoot us a call or an email, and we can kind of explain anything in here that you might be questioning.
Does anybody, excuse me, anybody from the committee have anything?
No. If I may, I just want to say this. It's not so much a question for you folks, is that I've worked with a lot of controllers and a lot of financial experts over the years, and what we have going here in the office that Michelle and Sally head up is a great gift to the city. We have stewardship, we have transparency, we have candor, we have advice, we have all those things that we need. And if we're going too far, Michelle says, hold on, let's think through how we're going to get there. And you might help us find a way there. You might say, you're not going to go there. Which is exactly what we want. We had a lot of years where we did not have that kind of transparency from that office. Emails would go into a black hole and never to be responded to at all. We'd have questions at the commission table. We wouldn't get answers. What you have brought to the finance department is a breath of fresh air, and I very much appreciate it. It allows us and allows the commission to move forward with confidence that we have the financing in place, that we're all doing it the right way, and we don't need to be worried about, finding some mine that we're going to step on. So, thank you.
With that comment, I'd accept a motion to commend Michelle and her office and everybody that works there on a great job again. Obviously, we have to wait for the state to determine whether or not we get the certificate or not, but again, I been at this for a long time with the audits, and I would echo what Mr. Murray said. So I would accept a motion.
I'll second it.
Okay. And I suppose you got to go call for that, too.
We don't need to take a roll on saying thank you. We're good. I appreciate it. I really do. I appreciate it.
I'll stick to the rules.
I appreciate it, but it really does. It's not just finance office. We need every employee of the city to be doing what they're supposed to be doing to get a clean audit. So, everybody starting at an administrative assistant that's looking at purchase orders and invoices, they got to be doing their job. It's all the way up. So, obviously I love our finance team. We have a really good team right now, but everybody at the city has to contribute to get a clean audit. So it's much appreciated, and I thank you guys for recognizing what we do.
Thank you. And thank you for your work this year.
Glad we could have everything done timely for you. And
See you next year.
Yeah. You get 6 months away from us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Do we have to recommend the audit or anything? I didn't think we did, but if I don't do it, I'll get yelled at. Okay. Michelle, you're on.
So, such an exciting agenda today. We have next up June financials, just kind of highlighting where we're at. Obviously, June's the midpoint of the year, and we're looking to be in good shape for the year. Doing something of its own. All right, so June financials, just a highlight here at the top. So, in that far right column, you'll see our revenues year-to-date.
Okay, now it's up.
Okay, there we go. So year-to-date revenues, just over $15 million. Last year at this time, we were at $14 million. Here's the major differences in 2024 versus 2023. You'll see this one here at the top. A little bit concerning was income tax. At the end of June, we were down $400 and almost $50,000. But I can tell you in July, we'll see the second half distribution from Rita on Monday of next week. We actually have exceeded what we had year to date when we hit July. So it's just a timing issue. There was a lot of net profit returns that were filed that we received the funds in July instead of June last year. So it's just a timing difference. But at first it was a little alarming, and we had some conversations like, okay, is that going to be a new trend? But we're looking to be okay. Emissions tax, we're up $229,000 compared to where we were last year at the same time. Lodging tax, we're $37,000 ahead of where we were last year at the same time. And interest earnings, this number right here, almost $800,000 in interest earnings. Again, we've talked about it a couple different times. Largest interest earnings are from our ARPA dollars. We're still at the point we have just over $5 million of uncommitted funds. For ARPA, we have many projects coming. Skate Park, I believe, started this week, so that's another project. We have the cash, it's been sitting there, and the benefit is we earn the interest on it. The interest stays in the general fund. It does not have to go back into the ARPA state and local fiscal recovery funds. It can go to the general fund. So we're seeing the benefit of that. So right now, $800,000 is what we have in interest earnings at the end of June. That's $155,000 difference from where we were at the same time last year. So great news, I guess, if you're sitting on cash. Not so great news if you're looking to borrow. But that's where we're at so far. To touch on the general fund expenditures, you'll see right here, $14.5 million is what we've expended this year. Same time last year, we were at $14.1 million. So there's a difference of $322,000 of expenditures. And we'll kind of, here's the employee count. So at the end of June, we're at 247 employees. Employee count is up. As we all know, we took over the police force at Cedar Point, so there was 5 additional officers that we are finally able to fill those positions. We've hired, I believe is it 5 or 6? Okay, 6 officers here within the last 6 weeks. So we've been doing really great on recruiting. So you'll see the numbers increase. There was also, from fact-finding report, the fire department did gain 3 employees. Those have been staffed mostly, pretty much throughout the period from when that fact-finding report came out. We went hiring immediately. I believe they're down one employee right now, but we'll work to fill that. But as a city right now, that 247 full-time employees is pretty much a full employee count. We're not really looking for very many full-time employees at this time. On this screen here, go down, just looking at general fund revenues. So we talked about the number of what we have in revenue, just over $15 million this year. Right on target. We've collected 49% of what we had estimated for the year. Now we are at June. You're thinking we should be at 50% or better. A lot of our revenue, admissions tax, lodging tax, comes in the later part of the year. So nothing alarming there, looking really good. The next group of highlighted here in blue is our expenditures. So what we've expended for this year is only 47% of the budget. Now, our expenditures are more in line with, yes, we should be closer to 50%. There are some seasonal employees, obviously, we hire in the summer months. But seeing that our expenditures are under 50% of what we budgeted for the year, nothing alarming. We look to be in really good shape. The cash balance here is $5.7 million, which is very similar to where we were last year at this time. We'll just go to the charts here. This just highlights all the major revenue sources. Again, everything in blue is our income tax. As we talked, we saw a little dip in income tax in June, but we've recovered that and more when we get to July. The gray line down here is our admissions tax. We saw a little increase there. Same thing with the lodging tax. Total revenue, $15 million is where we are sitting for 2024. Here is the year-to-date expenditures for our top 5 departments. Top line in blue up there is our administrative support. Again, that will include any kind of transfers that we have as a city. Any kind of transfers that go out of the general fund to another fund are included in that administrative support department. The next lines that are kind of neck and neck there are the fire department and police department. Their expenses are very similar, and they continue to be very similar. Municipal court is on there in yellow, and then the horticulture and public realm division is on there in gray. Expenses by category. The blue line at the top, this shows wages and fringe benefits. So you'll see we have hired employees, so of course our cost of the wages and fringe benefits has increased. The yellow line there is specifically just the transfers. The transfers that we did this year, $4.6 million. Last year we were about 5.2. And those transfers are, again, coming from the general fund, going to another fund, whether it was a promise for issue 8, if it's something with the Cedar Point Partnership, where we're transferring the money to, typically it's the capital projects fund. The orange line there is contractual services, pretty, very similar to where we were last year. And the gray line is supplies and materials. Nothing alarming on that one. This shows just the general fund expenditures, including the transfers. That's what we talked about before. We're at $14.5 million in expenditures for the year. Again, that's only 47% of our budget for the year. Oops. This shows the cash balance in the general fund. We're sitting at $5.7 million, similar to where we were at this time last year. As we noted, income tax didn't see a dip in June of this year. We recover that in July. And the last slide here just shows the number of full-time employees. Of the 247 full-time employees that we have, police and fire are going to account for most of them. You know, nearly 100 of our employees are in our safety services division, and then every other department that we have on there is listed, and the employee count is there for you. That's what I had for June financials. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Chairman, it would be interesting to see employee expense divided out by the number of employees. I think that would be an interesting statistic.
By department?
No, if you showed that rapid rise in terms of wages, and I think it would be, you'd flatten it out a little bit more if you divided it by the number of employees. It would just be interesting to see that.
Okay.
And the other thing that I think would be interesting, and maybe this is just an exercise, but it strikes me as though, you know, Sandusky is so unusual in terms of the amount of seasonal revenues that we have. It would be interesting to see on a single chart, and you'd have to adjust the scale, but if you had monthly revenues and expenses and then compared that with the cash balance, just be interesting to see that, because the cash balance is obviously the anchor for those swings. I don't know if it would tell us anything. I'd take the Excel spreadsheet but I don't know how to make graphs out of it, so.
We can get that figured out. So we do have in the reports, we do the monthly expenditures by department, and then at the bottom part is the year-to-date by department, but we can look at trying to do something with employee counts also.
I don't think I'm not asking you to do it on a monthly basis. I think if you just had an annual
Okay.
year-end number, this is just for,
Yeah, I think that's going to tell a tale of what happened for the year.
yes, right.
Got it.
In your spare time.
Got it. Thank you, everyone. If you don't have any questions on the June
So
financials.
anybody from the committee have
Looks good. No, looks great.
questions?
Yeah,
Yeah.
looks good.
Again, we're moving, and I assume my favorite question to you is our stabilization fund is moved there and smiling well.
I'm sorry, I don't know how I neglected to report on that. So it's
Fun, you know,
$416,922. Yeah. So payroll stabilization, it remains stable. It doesn't move until we do the transfer at the end of the year. So we're still at $416,000 in payroll stabilization.
So, anybody else have any questions?
No.
If you guys don't have any questions on the June financials, I just want to note, I did send out an email to you guys, but Rita did send out non-file letters. So if any of you get contacted by anybody, hey, I received this letter from Rita, it says I did not file, what do I need to do? In that email, their compliance department at Rita is the one that handles that. There's all the contact information that anybody would need to get a hold of Rita. Obviously, the first thing someone needs to do is, pick up their folder if they had an accountant or somebody prepare it. Make sure it was actually filed with Rita. Sometimes there is throws in the folder and it never gets filed with Rita. Obviously, that would be the easiest fix. But if there's any, issues that someone can't get resolved with Rita, I am happy to jump in and help anybody that needs help with receiving a non-file letter from Rita.
That seems to work, though, helping us collect money.
We all have to pay taxes whether we like it or not. So this is just a letter. They're just trying to get everything cleaned up right now. So as long as everybody does what they need to do, there's no issues going forward. There wouldn't be collection or anything as long as they do the filing and paying. If there's any tax owe, everyone will be in good standing with Rita.
Does anybody else have any questions? Michelle? Thank you very much. I guess now I'm down to public participation. Mrs. Johnson? Leave the cane back there.
Sharon Johnson, 1139 Fifth Street. I just have about 3 things here I wanted to comment, and this is just my view as a taxpayer. I wanted to touch bases on the water and sewer. No one's happy about this. From the documents I'm seeing, there's more increases coming after the 14 years is up. Close to that. We've had 14 years of increases. And when you take the percentage of each year for over the 14 years, it comes to a total of 126% increase. That's a lot over 14 years. Everybody's blaming this onto EPA, but I think, in my opinion, I think there's a lot of development going on, and the development's causing some problems here with the water and sewer, I think. You have to have proper infrastructure for new development. We're going to have all that battery park development going on. You have to have a good foundation of infrastructure underneath those buildings.
I'm not quite getting your question. What question do you have?
She's entitled to make comments.
I'm just commenting on these, on how I feel about this, okay? And the next one is the leasing of the debt. Did I understand that the Justice Center is not going to be COPS, it's going to be bonding now?
That was the recommendation that this committee just made to City Commission.
Okay, I'm glad to see that. I wasn't at the last meeting, your last meeting, and I was disturbed by what the consultant was telling you about leasing out debt and all of this. And I was disturbed, and now I'm feeling a little more comfortable now that the Justice Center is going the other way. I don't want leasing out the debt. That looks bad. Also, I think what's driving all of the debt, a good share of this, is that MOU that we did with Cedar Point, the 20-year MOU we're doing with Cedar Point. That is not sustainable. That has to be modified. We have promised out a lot of projects to Cedar Point, major projects, and we're sheltering all of that debt. I don't know how we're going to do that over 20 years. And you've obligated that MOU to all the new commissioners coming on board for 20 years. They're stuck with this agreement. And when I looked into this MOU is an agreement between two parties. The city only signed the MOU. Cedar Point did not sign the MOU, I'm told. So I don't know how you can make an agreement without Cedar Point signing the MOU. And we never did have a contract after that. There's usually a contract that follows that MOU. We never had a contract. So I'm very concerned about that 20-year promise we made to Cedar Point. It's just not sustainable. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Anybody else wish to make any comments? If not, is there anything else that the committee has? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
There you go.
Second, okay. We're on. You need a second.
If you call the roll call.
Mr. Thomasula?
Yes.
Mr. Rousseau?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Nichols?
Yes.
Mr. Ramey?
Yes.
Mr. Stahl?
Yes.
Mr. Orzak?
Yes.
Myself, yes. Thank you all. We'll see you in September.
Absolutely.